some interesting stuff in here.
Yeah. Is this the first time we see, well, it might not be the first time, but maybe as it's plainly stated, kissing cousins?
I think that's more of a traditional Middle Eastern greeting. It was, more. I find it funny that he sees Rachel and weeps.
Yeah.
you don't really pick up girls that way anymore.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, technically they are kissing cousins later on down the road, but
yeah, that is kind of an interesting way to meet a girl for the first time. But I'm guessing that was overcome in Rachel's mind once she realized, oh wait, this is the son of Isaac, the super wealthy relative of ours.
Yeah.
But so just for the audience reading along, guys, this is what I've been preparing for folks. A lot of people have trying to use these as home studies for their home fellowship. Now, I do apologize, everybody. We were traveling the last week and a half. We had a funeral to go to across the country, and I took my entire computer with me. But when I got to our Airbnb and set it up, it wouldn't work. So I couldn't do any work for like a whole, all my slides were on that computer. So I couldn't do it. That's why the broadcast I did several days ago was just me on my laptop with no background and no slides and just a Q&A. But that's why these are prepared like they are for people if they want to use them at home each week or in following years. And so I just had a quick summary that kind of helps us all have a little bit to spur and thought and talk about. Jacob finished his journey to Mesopotamia. This is where, even though they were from Haran, apparently they're now living in an area around Mesopotamia. So that's just a little geographical tidbit there that could be overlooked. But he arrived at this well and he meets Laban's daughter, Rachel. It is kind of weird that he cries, but I don't know exactly what that means as far as like weeping with joy or just, but yeah, it's exciting. Jacob helped Rachel water the herds and revealed his identity to her. So I thought this was interesting because it was like, remember back when Rebecca first met Isaac, she helped him water his camels and Isaac's servant. She helped him hurriedly water all of his animals. And so here's Jacob returning that same act of kindness, which I think is a part of Torah. And so I don't know if it impressed her or whatever, because this reminds me of my grandparents. I think I've said this in previous episodes, but my grandmother tells us that my grandfather back in the 1920s first introduced himself to her because they were working in a cotton field in southern Oklahoma, and they were picking cotton. And he apparently went over to her row and said, "Hey, if you like, I'll hoe your row for you." And like that was his pickup line.
Nice.
I'll pick that cotton for you, because apparently back in the I've never picked it myself, but as I've been told, it makes your fingers bleed when you pick the cotton out directly because it's real sharp and prickly. But so anyway,
being chivalrous right out the gate. That's right. A good man.
I was wondering about the weeping thing, because wasn't it Jacob's parents that sent him over to his uncle's place basically for the specific portion of getting a wife? Like that was the whole thing. And then when he got there, I mean, clearly she was pretty good looking, and she was shapely and beautiful. And when he sees her, he's like, "Oh, thank you, she's not, she's not ugly or whatever." I think that's the weeping part. I think he was really like, just, "Oh, she's good looking," at least, So I think that's probably
she hasn't fallen down this well.
It's too bad for Leah though, eh?
Yeah. You know what? Yeah. What's funny is like Leah. They describe her with sad eyes, and I'm like, that must just not have been like an attractive feature back then.
Yeah. What do you guys think that means? Where it says some say sad, some say weak eyes. What do you guys think that means?
The weak eyes, the sad eyes I can get because it's more of a like downturned eyes. So I guess it just depends on what the beauty standards were at that time. But as far as the weak eyes, I don't know. Maybe she had a lazy eye or something. Who knows?
Oh yeah, that's what I was gonna suggest. Maybe she had some pupils going in different directions.
I've wondered that too. I know the Book of Jubilees references later after Rachel dies, or no, it's at this time when he first meets them both. But it says that Leah had a shapely body, but that she had weak eyes.
Yeah.
So it says that she looked good from the neck down, I guess. But I don't know what that means. All I know is that later on, just for all the women out there watching, guys, because most of the women have read the story and know where we're going with this. But later on, I just want to encourage you guys. The Jubilees tells us that after Rachel died, that Jacob loved Leah with all of his heart and treated her well and loved her until her day of death. And so she was Even though we're about to read about some competition here and some competition between sisters, Leah is not, she's not truly treated like second class at any point.
I think that God, though, his intent was for her to be with, but like, Leah originally, because if you look who comes from Leah, right, the first 4 children are, some very notable names, like the tribe of Levi, the tribe of Judah. And then when you get into the servants and stuff, which really isn't covered here, but you get the tribe of Dan, which flees off into paganism and stuff like that. So it's an interesting, seeing which people come from which wife.
Yeah, it's interesting.
I like how the interaction with his uncle when he gets there is like, oh, you're here, okay, and then we see that he stays a month. So Jacob's just kind of chilling around for a month, and then the uncle just gets to it. All right, just because you're a relative doesn't mean you're gonna, cheap out here and just eat everything and court my daughter's here for nothing. So let's get you to work, shall we? So it's just funny. He's just like, let's get to work, and off they go. So it's great.
Yeah, that actually brings me to this point here where we look at is it Jacob informed Laban of all that happened with Isaac, Esau, and how he received the blessing. And did you guys notice Laban's response? I thought this was fascinating. Laban says, "Oh, indeed, you are a relative of mine."
Mm-hmm.
So I try to put myself in that conversation, right? So we got this meeting, all the pleasantries are happening, then they're doing the moment where Laban takes Jacob aside and they start catching up on things, and Jacob's like, yeah, and he's like, oh, what brought you up here? Jacob's like, well, I came up here because of Esau's trying to kill me. He's like, wait, why is Esau trying to kill you? Well, so my mom told me to take and put on his clothes and go in before Isaac and receive the blessing instead of him. And I can just see Laban's mind turning here, right? Because we're going to see Laban's character later throughout this, and he's definitely in this mindset of trying to pull one over on Jacob all these years. Yeah. And so it just cracks me up that he actually openly admits in this moment, yeah, indeed, you are a relative of mine, aren't you? It's pretty funny.
That's great.
Apple doesn't fall too far from the tree,
yeah.
Right?
Yeah. But he does offer Jacob a paid job at this point. And Jacob, turns that into an offer to work 7 years for the opportunity to marry Rachel. So this is the part that I've heard differently throughout my life, and it wasn't until several years ago I studied this part of the text a little more thoroughly, and I saw that at the end of that 7 years, he is given Leah, and he doesn't recognize it till the next morning, but he also takes Rachel at that same time, and then just agrees to work another 7 years for Rachel there as well. So he actually gets both wives, from my understanding of the reading, at the end of the first 7 years, but then he's paying off the next 7 years by working for Rachel too.
Yeah, and he has to wait that week-long time frame is the celebration of the wedding, and that's time. So he's like saying, well, look, take care of you because the process of the Hebrew wedding, that you had to go through the consummation and you had to verify that consummation, and so then that was like this whole week-long celebration. Didn't want to take anything away from Leah's celebration, and then give Rachel to him as well. So
yeah, so then it's assumed, I'm guessing, that he went through another week-long marriage ceremony and celebration, consummation, and verification with Rachel at some point after that first week. Well, I can understand why Laban would be like, no, at least finish this first week and then you can have Rachel, right? Yeah. So it's interesting. That seems like an overall extremely awkward first month of marriage.
Well, yeah. What I find fascinating too is, we know that Jacob has received the blessing of the priesthood, right? And that he's fled over to his uncle's place, and his uncle, we're assuming, knows about this new position of his. So I'm just wondering, because later on in the text here that we just read, Laban says that it's the custom to give the firstborn daughter, right, in a hand marriage as opposed to the younger first. And we know that in Jubilees it talks about that's like a Torah instruction, right? So I'm just wondering, did Jacob, was he not familiar with that instruction or what? Because you assume when you come there, and we know that he learned the Torah. He was learning the ways of his forefathers, and I don't know, was that one he overlooked and just wanted Rachel first, or
I think the assumption is that he was he was chasing after Rachel, and that's all he cared about. And he thought that Laban agreed to that. So yeah, pulled that little like a shyster move on him.
and apparently between the birthright and the blessing, he's not he's not at all worried about hierarchy of the firstborn.
Right.
Right, because he just took both of those from Esau. So I don't know. It's an interesting thought. It's a good call, Ken. Now this actually brings up a question though that I had for you guys. Last week we read about him getting the blessing from Isaac, but if that blessing, as we tried to surmise from the text and from everything involved, if that blessing relates to the priesthood that Isaac passes down, and we see this specifically in Jubilees, spoken from Isaac down to Jacob, and then Jacob passes it down to Levi. So if that was the case, do we think that Jacob stepped into active duty of the priesthood at that point? Or do you think that he doesn't do that until he goes back in chapter 31?
I think we definitely see him, that role fully realized later on. So, we could maybe make that assumption that's when he actually gets inaugurated as the priest now, even though it was already technically given to him years prior.
Yeah.
But well, because we don't see anything really in the text, right? I don't really see him doing
Well, I
much
do.
before that.
I look at the blessings, right, that were given to Jacob and Esau as I coin them as firstborn, and then one is a genetic lineage, while the other was like a Melchizedek blessing. It goes to whom the Holy Spirit decides. And so when you see him stealing the one, and then Esau comes back and says, because he stole Esau's firstborn blessing, which was supposed to be, you get the money, you take care of the family, all that kind of stuff. So he took that, but he was already gifted the other blessing, which was out of his father's hands. Because when Esau comes in and says, well, can I have my brother's blessing? He says, it's not my blessing to give. So it's an interesting thing that the only thing that Jacob actually got was the firstborn blessing. And that was what they were really arguing over the whole time. But the second blessing was like that Melchizedek line, that priestly line that was not genetic alone, but more of a Holy Spirit residing on who it chooses to down that line. So I always thought that part was interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think the Spirit probably prompted Abraham, as we see in the book of Jubilees, to tell Rebekah, make sure that Jacob does receive it over Esau, because if I recall correctly, I mean, Isaac was favoring Esau more. He was favoring Esau more. He was almost myopic to the fact that Jacob was more in line with what a priest should do and how a priest would operate, and Esau was marrying pagan wives and really not doing what the priest would do within the office of priest. So I think that the Spirit definitely moved on Abraham to down the line to get Rebekah to tell Jacob, your father, I think he's a little blinded to the fact that you're the one that needs to get this blessing for the priesthood. So we're gonna have to do it through some, I guess you could say, trickery, even though it was foreordained for him to do that.
Yeah.
To be that.
Yeah,
So.
and we talked about that last time about how it definitely seems like trickery. I just don't fully believe Isaac was. I don't fully believe Isaac was in disagreement once it became known Jacob actually received the blessing instead of Esau, because then when Esau is pleading and begging with Jacob says, "There's nothing I can do."
Yeah,
he's like, looks like and it says, indeed, he will be blessed and he will be in this position. And it's like, okay, so, all right. So yeah, it's like Esau. It's not like Isaac said, "Oh, someone tricked me. He'll take that back." That doesn't apply, because Isaac's still the elder. You know what I mean? No, it was like he let that decision stand and be affirmed. And I think and we talked about last week how a lot of this was being done in the presence of an angel. So Aaron, I'm not sure if you had a chance to watch the past couple episodes. We've been digging in. Mm-hmm. We've been looking at this idea of who is this? What's validating these things along the way? What is this angel of the Lord that keeps showing up all the time and speaking visions and dreams and things like that, and helping Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob?
We've been talking about that as well on our Revelation series that we're doing over on SitRep on the Take on the World TV channel. But my co-host, he's been following along with your show for a long time, and he brought up the book of the Apocalypse of Abraham, and it introduces an angel called Jael, which, of course, everybody knows there's no J, right? So it would be Yael. So literally it would be I am Elohim, right? Is his name. And I think Roman Catholic Church might have actually got something right, because they have this angel in their theology called the angel of the Lord, or the voice of the Lord. And it's literally like he's a mouthpiece for God, and actually will claim first person when speaking to somebody. So it's like it's an angel that God speaks through, kind of like a walkie-talkie. And he's pretty much the one that claims like casting down fire onto Sodom and Gomorrah, and has the ability to hold back, the enemy and all kinds of stuff. So it's a very interesting angel that I think people should check out.
Yeah, angels are awesome.
Yeah, there's a lot of angelic activity in the scriptures that gets kind of glazed over, and I think it's fun.
I wasn't aware that you said there was an angel present when the blessing was taking place, Sean.
It's okay, brother. I know you don't get to watch every one of our broadcasts. It's okay.
I'll have to get to that one. That's something that's
missed.
If that's the case, then that's huge, right? Because then
I'm surprised you didn't message me the past couple of weeks, because we've been digging in deep in Genesis, and we finding out that there's been angelic activity everywhere, right? And this is things that are confirming at different places, or he's validating the anointment process. Like we looked at it in 1 Samuel as well. And so, check out, we talked in some great depth about this angel of the Lord, and sometimes referred to as just in the presence of the Lord, right? It's this agency of this angel that's there to validate and to guide and to be a part of these patriarchs' lives, especially if it's a part of the priesthood that's being passed on, because they would be ministering them in the presence of the Lord, just like we see the example of the Torah and Exodus with the Levites and Aaron.
I think you see this idea of it's legalese, right? It's understanding covenant has to have somebody to witness and validate it.
Yeah.
So, it can't just, it's like the two witnesses. There always has to be a confirmation, a confirming witness. So when it's one person in God, he brings somebody else in to be the observer, to be I guess witness is the term, but there's another legal term for who that person is. So I think that's, why that entity or whatever is there on site is literally to be the co-witness to what's happening. So between heaven and earth kind of thing. So.
Yeah. For example, we see this, I'm going to pull this up real quick. This is in the book of Jubilees, in chapter 10, when Canaan is about to override the pact that he made, and he's going to steal Shem's land, which is how it becomes the land of Canaan. And his family, Ham, Cush, and Mitzrayim said to him, like, don't do this. This isn't yours. And it says down here, right here, it says, if you dwell in the land of Shem, you'll be cursed. It says, cursed are you, and cursed shall you be beyond all the sons of Noah by the curse by which you bound yourselves by an oath in the presence of the holy judge and in the presence of Noah, our father. I think this angel's been there the whole time.
Well, I think you see that echoed in Sodom and Gomorrah, where you have this angel who comes to Abraham at that time, right? And then he also brings two angels that go into the city. So you have two witnesses that are going in there to view for themselves everything that's going on. So again, it's like almost having multiple, especially with something like a judgment. There has to be two witnesses to see it, someone to preside over judgment, and then it's just cool to see this repetitive thing that God follows this specific layout that he does every single time. You just have to look for the characters in the text.
Yeah, in chapter 28 of Genesis, we see when Jacob was told to go to his relative Laban's house, which was a great journey, like 2 or 3 day journey north to Mesopotamia. He stops at Bethel. I think it was Bethel. That's where he has the vision of the angels ascending and descending and all that. And on the top of the ladder is the angel that speaks to him and says, hey, this, and that. And then he says, yeah, I will be with you on your journey. So this is where,
well, he says that too at the end, right? And to the angel that was with me, like, on his like deathbed or whatever, he's like essentially saying, and the angel that was along my journey, I bless you or whatever. He's doing the blessings at the end. I think it's in chapter 49, Genesis.
Oh, I'll have to go look that up. I don't remember that. But
yeah, he mentions how an angel, was pretty much around all the time. But yeah, it's crazy. He names that place, I think it was Lutz or something like that, and he calls it Bethel, the house of God, or the gate of God, or something like that. And yeah, it wouldn't surprise me, man, that there's just angels everywhere all the time. I mean, we already know angelic interactions are, all over the scriptures, but for them to be literally present as much as you're saying there, I mean, that wouldn't surprise me. That's cool.
Yeah, it's very.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. Go ahead, Aaron. Yeah.
Oh, I was just going to say the only thing that really stands out from the text, and what you were speaking about with the previous Torah portion, irregardless of like what happens with man and their kind of, their deceptions and their, like Laban kind of pulling the switcheroo, and then, Isaac being inspired to, or Jacob being inspired to steal from his brother and all this, that God's purpose and plan still comes through. And this even carries down to the story of Judah and his daughter-in-law when she gets inspired to dress up like a prostitute, and that's the line of Yeshua. It comes through Perez, which she has twins from that point, from Judah. And it's just these kind of comical scenarios that had to play out, that if it didn't go down the way that it would it have gone down at all, kind of thing. But it's really interesting to see that regardless of, the plans of mice and men, God, his plans still come to fruition.
Yeah, it's really beautiful. So in the mindset of Jacob, while he's going through this, where he sees the woman he wants, it's kind of the whole reason. Well, he didn't go to Laban's house specifically for a woman, but he went there because, his mother told him, hey, you need to flee. Okay. This is Aaron. I'm not sure if you saw last week, but this is where we actually compared both accounts from Genesis 28 and Jubilees. I think it was Jubilees 29, where it has the fullness of Rebecca speaking to Isaac about, hey, we need to send Jacob to go get a daughter from our relatives and from Laban. And she then tells Jacob, here's how I'm going to protect you from Esau killing you. Because it was told to her in a dream, as Genesis 28 talked about, that she was told in a dream that Esau, the plans were revealed to her that Esau was harboring in his heart that as soon as Isaac dies, he was going to go and kill Jacob.
Sure.
So Esau doesn't know that his mother knew this because it was revealed to her in a dream. Yeah, his mother doesn't tell Isaac. She doesn't want to stir up trouble, but she wants to protect Jacob. So she then tells Jacob, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to send you to Laban's house. That way you're out of his sight, and maybe he'll forget about it by the time Isaac dies. And then his anger will have time to cool down. And then I'm going to tell your dad that I'm sending you up there to go find a wife. So also go find a wife. Yeah. so like Rebecca is
two birds with one stone.
Man. Yeah. She's doing everything she can to keep this family from being destroyed. And so, so he's up there. He works 7 years. He gets the eldest daughter. He also gets the next daughter, and he's going to work another 7 years. That's going to be 14 total years. But during this time, the ladies start having babies. And that's where Jacob agreed to work another 7 years for Rachel. But then over time, Leah has given birth to Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah. And so this leads us into chapter 30.